My name is Joe Horton, and the question of what I do always trips me up, and as it does most people nowadays because we do so many things. But I'm a musician, I guess, first and foremost, but I also do, I use the cop-out term interdisciplinary artist, which is a fancy way of saying I do stuff, but I'm not going to tell you what stuff I do. So let's say musician and interdisciplinary artist. Yeah. Meditation for me is sitting down in a dark room. It's kind of as simple as that. I try not to put anything else on it. I just sit down in the dark room. I remember the first time I meditated, I was in my practice space and we shared it with a bunch of different people. So there was a bunch of bands around town that had the space, and a lot of them were touring bands. And so we were lucky enough, my band was lucky enough to be able to kind of have the run of it because people were traveling a lot. And I would often go in there during the day and play piano and just kind of hang out and play music. And one day I was feeling blocked up about something. I can't even remember what it was, but I was like, okay, maybe this meditation thing is the answer to all of my problems. And so the lights were dim anyway for some nice little ambiance, but I turned them off and then I sat down and was beset by, like, is this it? Am I doing it? Is this what it feels like? Am I, okay? No, should I sit over there? Okay, I should sit over there. And I got up and like walked to a different part of the room. I was like, yeah, this part of the room feels right. And then just, kept doing that and was really antsy. Mostly because I was looking for the point. Like I kept asking myself, is this gonna lead to the thing I think it's gonna lead to? Which I can recognize now after having done it for so long as just being the machinations of the mind. But that was the first time, and that was probably, over a decade ago, but I don't know exactly how long ago. I was in my mid-20s and I'm in my mid-30s now, so about a decade ago. Yeah. I've been meditating for 10 years. There's been times in there where I meditated every day, and where I had a space set up with a small altar that had a candle on it that was, I never actually lit, but that for some reason it was important to have the candle there. And that I had a go-to spot. And then we moved recently, and there was a little bit of like, oh, okay, well I can do it in the kitchen until this, well no, I should probably pick here. And so I'm in the process now of building a room in my basement in the process might be a little generous. I've started, so it's like cleaned out and we stripped like the walls and stuff like that. But starting the process of building a room in the basement that's going to be just for that. And that's something I've always wanted to have, was a room that was just dedicated to that. I didn't write in it, I didn't make any art in it, I didn't read in it, I didn't do anything else but that in that room. And that anyone can use it, but they have to use it for that. It's quiet, silent room, no words. And yeah, so that I think that's gonna help reestablish the practice. As it is, what I usually do now is take a minute before bed, which is usually when I would meditate anyway. So like if I'm like in the flow of it, I usually sit for 2 45-minute windows, like a 45 minutes, and then I get up and walk around for 10 minutes, and then sit for another 45 or 20 if I don't feel like sitting for another time. I've never been big on like, it has to be for this long or this whatever, so sometimes longer, sometimes shorter. But what I do now is I'll sit for 10 or 15 minutes before I go to bed. So yeah, it'll wax and wane, but it kind of has throughout the last 10 years. But usually, for me, before bed is like a really good time to do it. It's really impacted it a lot. I mean, it's funny because to me, I often felt inadequate as a person, mostly because I didn't feel like I was wearing the cultural clothes, right? Like I didn't feel like I was, that I was saying the right things or doing the right things or in my life and in social interactions and all this stuff. And I just had like this undercurrent of anxiety that was present. And meditation was definitely one of the things that helped orient me to that. First, just exposing me to the fact that it was happening, that my mind was rambling, and those ramblings were self-destructive in a way, that they were like a blanket laid over my real self. And real's a loaded word, but you know what I mean? Like your thoughts can oftentimes be like a constant distraction. I often think about it like, you know, if you go down to the basement and you're afraid and you go la 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 la, I'm not scared, I'm not scared. And I realized how that was what I was doing, and these like machinations in my mind were this like constant distraction to not look at things as they were. And even just noticing that that's what was happening was a huge load off my shoulders. Like it made me feel less ill or less like not enough or something. I was like, oh, okay, I can see that these things are happening, and that calmed me down quite a bit. And then beyond that, I feel like meditation has given me a sort of ground from which to spring off from. And so now, instead of the ground being like the cultural clothes that you put on, or like, am I this enough or am I that enough? I feel like my ground or my baseline is nothing. And that's what's great about meditation, is it's not anything. And so that is a much better baseline, I feel like, to jump off from than the one that you're handed to or that you absorb through osmosis in the culture at large. Meditation has severely impacted the art that I make. So there's two things I think that have impacted my art more than anything else. Three, I would say, all of which ultimately have to do with boundary disillusionment. So the first in chronological order was psychedelics. So I took mushrooms and was like, this is a weird feeling, and didn't even really, I just knew it was stranger than I had expected it to be. Like I was like accustomed to drugs, but psychedelics aren't drugs, and nobody kind of tells you that. Like our culture lumps them into drug culture, and they're like, yeah, you've been drunk, you know, like do like mushrooms next.
Yeah.
And they're not that at all. And so I knew that they were strange, and they sort of they broke certain tethers that I had to cultural narratives or personal narratives. Them by themselves, I don't think would have been as impactful if it wasn't for a meditative practice to bring it back to, where I was able to just, again, sit in the dark and just sit down and sort of exhaust my mind a little bit. And so the biggest hindrance I have to making art is just the rambling saying like, you can't do this, or this is, because art constantly presses you forward, at least the way I like to engage with it. I'm always at the edge of my ability. Like I always have to learn a new thing. I always have to attempt to organize people in a different way. I have to work with new spaces and new types of people and new types of organizations and stuff. And the thing likes to pop up and say, you know, you need me, I'm here to tell you how much you suck as a person. And so psychedelics sort of broke my tether to that thing, but it reattaches pretty quickly. But meditation sort of slowed things down a little bit for me to like watch it reattaching and watching what had become this sort of expansive view of self shrink back down into this hole that was lined by these thoughts of being like, nope, you can't do that, nope, that sucks, nope, this, and how much I was like addicted to addicted to self-deprecating thoughts. I was addicted to it, I was jonesing for it, I wanted it. That's a weird feeling to like not like it, and to be like, I'm stuck in a trap, this is bad. But then the real trap, it's an addictive trap, like it's you know it's self-destructive, but also you want it. And so, you know, meditation allowed me to slow things down enough to watch that tether sort of reattach itself, and then the next time I would go into the psychedelic space, break more of the tether, come back, it reattached more slowly, and I was able to sort of stop certain aspects of it reattaching. And so, in that sense, it's freed me up a lot to be a lot more brave. Like, I'm way more likely now than I ever have been in my life to attempt something that I maybe even, like where it's like, that's too ambitious, like I probably shouldn't do that. But now my MO is kind of like, you've done this before. Like you've made that leap before and you landed. Or if you don't land, who cares? Like now I see art much more than I have in the past, and I'm hoping, to me, a lot of the practice, like moving forward, is to embody this more and more, to move forward to the point where it's all play and just grabbing putty and moving it around and just sort of like experiencing it rather than having any attachment to it at all. So the less attachment I have to my work, the more I enjoy the process, the more the rigor and ambition feels healthy and not self-destructive, and the better I think the work is, or the more impactful it is to me, at least. And people seem to react that way to it too. In terms of the philosophies involved here, I spent a lot of time studying different cultures and just a lot of different things, like a lot of time studying in general, mostly as like a, after like say a psychedelic trip, one of the other ways that I put myself back together is through study. So it's like meditation and study meditation. But in that sense, the people who have been very influential in that way are Carl Jung in particular. I think I mentioned Pema Chodron earlier, but the Buddhist teachings are really calming and orienting, because they often speak from that place of like, remember that this is all good, or at least the bad that you see in it, or the good, even the good that you see in it is based on your own projections, and that's all illusory. A lot of Hindu teachings have, like there's a Hindu saying, as the angel of death arrives, terror, or as the angel of death approaches, terror, as the angel of death arrives, bliss. And that's something I hold on to that one, because I think the fear of death is kind of one of the main like sources of everything. Like it's like it has a lot of faces to it, but really at the core of it, there's two main fears that are competing for attention. One is the fear of death and the other one is the fear of life. And so those are usually butting heads, and that one sort of helps to alleviate that. So the study has been influential in that sense. Personally, I had a couple people who were really influential that oriented me, and I mean a lot actually, quite a few. But the person who first oriented me to psychedelics in a way that I took them seriously was my friend Idea, who since passed away. And after he passed away was when I really started considering psychedelics in a serious way. Because when he first said it, I was like, whoa, man, that sounds like drugs. Or I was like, kind of like a little bit like, no, I can, marijuana's okay and alcohol's okay. The culturally accepted ones were fine, but those are not culturally accepted. And he really was patient and took his time in explaining. He's like, look, this thing isn't what you think it is. And allowed me to sort of drop a couple defense mechanisms to it that then allowed me to wade my way into the experience. So he was really influential in that sense, and amongst a lot of other people, but he was kind of the impetus. And then kind of the main influence on my life, the person that's really influenced me the most is my daughter. Because when she was born, I had this really clear sense that I was like beaming information to her, and it made me take it more seriously than I ever have, to be like, you better be really careful about the information that you're beaming to this person, because this is her life, this is it. And it just it changed the way I interacted with the whole thing. I became much more serious about my own spiritual life. I was like, I better like really do some work here. And yeah, everything kind of got lighter and heavier at the same time. Like I was able to carry it a little bit more. It felt like I had more strength. But then also it felt like the stakes were a lot higher. But she's such a magnificent person though, that it's like easy to just watch her deal with fear, and to see her existential fears coming up, and to see her, she's only 4, but she's already checking herself out in the mirror, and she's, worried about what this girl said at school, and you're like, okay, you can't, in my mind I was like, I gotta raise this perfect child who never has an insecurity or whatever. It's like, no, those are just natural to a human being, we just have them. But then trying to help her navigate. And so in that sense, I've just gotten a lot more serious about a lot of things since she's been born. One person who's the Dalai Lama is a really big influence, and there's one particular thing about the Dalai Lama that blew me away when somebody asked him if he was angry at the Chinese. And he said, no, why would I be angry at the Chinese? He's like, I wish them peace and happiness. And the reporter seemed to me to kind of be like, no, but you can tell me for real though. Like, you don't have to do the Dalai Lama thing. And I was like, this person is so in touch with this isness of reality, with reality as it is, that they're not susceptible to the shadows, even of something that is so easy to be susceptible to, of people taking your land and your country away from you. And I think being on stolen soil and being the descendants, the split descendant, I have native blood in me, I have black blood in me, I have white blood in me, I have killed myself and enslaved myself over and over again throughout history. And that could send me spinning to be like, how do I relate to this? Having dealt with racism and these things. But then also being a man and raising a daughter and being like, what is that all like? And so rather than trying to triangulate all that and be like, wait, I get 7 points for being black, and then I get -6 points for being a man, but I've still got 1 up because I'm not a white man, and like all this and shit. Instead of doing the math there, I really take influence from somebody like the Dalai Lama in that sense, where he's saying that there's an overriding sense of understanding of what we are here, at least to the extent that we can understand, that does not allow for past misdeeds to really stick to people, because they're not things to be, they're not buckets, like they're water, and they can't actually carry them around unless we go through the action of perpetually restating it over and over and over again. And I think the thing that he understands there more than anything is that hate of your enemy will damage you, and your enemy will be fine. Yeah. And so that level of not only awareness, but then the stalwartness to actually pull it together is really inspiring to me. So I take a lot from him and the countless other people that have, like Pema Chodron also talks about this a lot. Hell, Christianity, the concept of agape, like love for your enemy, I think was, like, Christians maybe formulated that early on better than anyone else has, that there's a sacredness to love for your enemy, no matter what. Not just like the enemies that do this and past a certain point, then you can hate them. Any hate is self-hate, any hate. So the radicalness of that love and that transcendent love is something that I aspire to and I appreciate from the teachers that have given it to us.